All right, now let's move on to the next video in our Holy Spirit series. Now again, I know that most of the confusion, questions that people have around the Holy Spirit come more around the power, miracle, supernatural elements of it. But before we move on to that, I want to make sure that we talk about the fruit of the Spirit. And the fruit of the Spirit really in our lives, when Jesus tells us over and over again in John chapter 14 and Galatians and other places that we should be producing fruit, what he's talking about is a transformed character, a transformed life that looks like the root of Christ that we are planted in. And for all the talk that people might have about their own gifts, talents, if they come from God, and whatever conversations about that, it's always important to remember that our character must outpace the gifting and talents of our lives. If there are times where gifts and talents outpace our character, this is when people get into trouble. This is when excuses are made for their behaviors. This is when people get into real trouble with their own behaviors because they were given permission and forgiveness and things were swept under the rug because of the talents they have. So before we get into gifts and talents, let's talk about the character, the fruit of the Spirit, because this is an important part of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, again, is the kind of regenerating, transformative agent of God on this side of eternity. And it's important to remember that as we want to grow in the fruit of the Spirit, that fruit is grown and not given. Fruit is grown and not given. So you can go to the grocery store and you can buy fruit there. But you can't go to church and buy or just pick up fruit of the Spirit, maturity, patience. You go there to be watered. You go there to be fertilized. You go there to be given the opportunity and given the elements you need to grow in those fruit. So let's look at this very famous passage from the Book of Galatians of the kind of fruit that we should have growing in our lives. Galatians 5:16. So I say, let the Holy Spirit guide your lives. Then you won't be doing what your sinful nature craves. The sinful nature wants to do evil, which is just the opposite of what the Spirit wants. And the Spirit gives us desires that are opposite of what the sinful nature desires. These two forces are constantly fighting with each other, so you are not free to carry out your good intentions. But when you are directed by the Spirit, you are not under the obligation to the law of Moses. This is now, again, keeping the Holy Spirit in our lives, but verse 22, but the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against these things. You can't just walk around expecting everything to be given to you. You're like, let me just find a fully developed fruit tree and then plant it in my own life. No, what you've got to start believing for is, I can grow in those areas. You got to believe that. The reason you should believe that is because I am a Christian. The Holy Spirit lives inside of me. And if the Spirit is guiding my life, here are the kind of fruit that He produces in my life. And again, these are not gifts or talents or personality traits. These are things produced by the Spirit. So it doesn't matter if you're a Enneagram 7 or a ENJT. It doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert. All of these things should be present and growing in your life. Now, based on the kind of personality that you have, some of them are going to be faster to rise than others, but it doesn't mean that you get to look at this list and be like, oh yeah, gentleness is not really my gift. These aren't gifts, these are fruit. And fruit is grown, not given. So we want to make sure that we are focused on remaining in God, remaining in Him, so that we can see this fruit grow in our lives. Here we have a challenge from John chapter 15 where Jesus explains how we can bear this fruit in our lives. He says, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and He prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, and you are the branches. For those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If you want to see the fruit of God grow in your life, remain in Jesus. Remain in His Word. Remain in prayer. Remain in worship. Remain in relationship with other people. Putting yourself in sacrificing, serving opportunities and challenges that you can make with other people. Remain in Him. And the more you remain in Him, just in the same way, my grass can grow just when the rain falls, or I can turn on my sprinklers and I can facilitate its growth even faster. I can see just how nature does with it, or I can weed and feed and fertilize and help it to grow even faster. If you want to see more fruit growing in your life, make sure that you're giving more attention to it by remaining in Jesus, because fruit is grown, not given.